We're going to continue our next session, building on some of the points that we heard from the panel before. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Guillaume Prithen. Guillaume is head of France in Southern Europe for Stripe, a leading payment system using tech to make accepting and making payments easier for companies of all sizes. Stripe is also now building a tech ecosystem in France, Spain, and Portugal. Guillaume, we want to welcome you to the stage so you can tell us a little bit more about yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is a very, very special day for us here in Spain. As we announced this morning that Stripe is now available to all Spanish businesses after a little more than a year in beta. But before jumping into that, I'd like to talk about building businesses for scale and making the right choices early on enough in the entrepreneurial journey. Let me start with one statistic that I think captures the present impact of the internet on the economy. The European Commission made a study and realized that between 2001 and 2011, 43% of GDP growth came from the internet in the US and in Europe. 43%. That's a pretty staggering number. And this is far from over. The entrepreneurial scene in Europe has been moving faster than ever, with new business being created every day, which means new economic opportunities for people, new job creation, like never before. And most of this has been done by companies who weren't even around 5 years ago. And those startups don't just look at their domestic market from the start. Those startups increasingly look global from day one. I guess we're all convinced about this here at South Summit, but the promise of the internet economy are now inspiring many others. When you think about it, there's been an amazing mindset change in the past 10 years with regard to entrepreneurs. A few years ago, being an entrepreneur was a very risky career choice. Today, entrepreneurs are the new icons of young people and of people who are thinking about what they want to do next in their life. What we've also been able to witness are new approaches to building businesses and the emergence of new players to make it easier and faster for businesses to get started. One of the key drivers of success for startups has always been focus. Focus on your product. Focus on your product market fit. Focus on hiring the right talent. Focus on the right markets. However, sometimes focus requires some pretty tough decisions to be made, especially in terms of technology. Why would you outsource a piece of your stack if you could actually build it internally, if you had the time to do so? So, the emergence of strong players in this space in the past 10 years has helped entrepreneurs make better decisions and be up and running in a matter of days rather than weeks, months, or even years. Think about data centers, for example. Today, no startup would think about building its own data center or hosting capabilities, since Amazon Web Services is around. And there are plenty more examples of that. And that's great news for startups. This means that starting and scaling a startup has never been as easy as it is today. In 15 years, the time it's taken companies to reach 100 million users has been divided by 3. And it now takes twice less more time for a startup to actually go beyond its domestic market than what it used to. Growing and glowing global is much more accessible now for startups than what it used to be. And it's also much, much cheaper. We recently asked British tech entrepreneurs to share their views on starting and scaling a business. Here's what they said. 9 out of 10 agreed that these new tools have made it easier for them to build their business. 7 out of 10 believe that some startups would not exist today if it weren't for these tools. When asked about which tools in particular, analytics, collaboration, hosting, and payments were the fields that these entrepreneurs mentioned most. And interestingly, founders and developers are the new decision makers on those tools. It used to be that IT departments, investors, or external consultants were the decision makers. Last, and hopefully this could inspire a few entrepreneurs in the room, the 3 areas that entrepreneurs said didn't have enough of these tools and would require more are legal, compliance, and cybersecurity. So now, how do they decide, these entrepreneurs, on which tools to use and why? First, they look at cost efficiency. And cost efficiency is not about being cheap, which is the cheapest, right? Cost efficiency is also looking at, as they scale, which one will enable them to focus their resources on what's core to their product. They also look into ease of integration and stability. Again, they want their engineers to focus on the product and making the product better. And they don't want them to spend time or too much time integrating these tools. Obviously, they also want these tools to simply work. Let's go back to focus for a second. What do you do yourself versus what do you outsource? When UK entrepreneurs were asked what was the #1 function they would outsource when starting their startup, payments came out as that #1 function. Payments is the #1 function that UK entrepreneurs would outsource when building a startup. This just wasn't true a few years ago. Let's take 2 examples of 2 very successful American companies. Take Uber, take Airbnb. They've been able to build an amazing customer experience for their users and amazing services. But what people don't know is that when those companies were created, they built everything themselves in terms of payment stack. And so what people don't know is that these companies have huge teams of people dedicated to payments, including huge teams of engineers. Now, let's look at Lyft. Lyft is Uber's main competitor in the US. This is how an experience buying on Lyft looks like. You look for a car, you request a Lyft, you found a Lyft, it comes, grabs you, and then you kind of continue. You can leave a tip if you want. Basically, that's a pretty neat experience. And no one would imagine that Lyft actually has less than 2 engineers working on payments globally. And they're not the only ones. And their secret sauce is actually not that secret. They just never had to build a payment infrastructure in the first place. They basically build on Stripe. Stripe is a software platform for running an internet business. People use Stripe to get paid by users anywhere in the world and basically move money around for them. We work with companies of every size, from companies with 2 developers to the largest and most successful internet companies in the world. Examples of these include Slack, Twitter, Kickstarter, Facebook, Salesforce. In Europe, more specifically, we work with large startups like Drivey, or Deliveroo. We also work with more established companies, like the Virgin Group or El Corte Inglés here in Spain. So how does this work? We basically abstract all the complexities of building a payment infrastructure so that you can focus on what's important for your business, your product, and your go-to-market strategy. And we do that in a way that is developer-friendly by focusing on clean, flexible, powerful APIs in a way that nobody has ever done before. By bringing modern technology to finance, we aim to make it easy to do previously difficult or impossible things. When you think about it, it would be an insane amount of time and effort and resources for every single marketplace out there to build its own marketplace payment infrastructure. So that's why we do it for them, so that they don't need to do it. People don't use Stripe to redo what's being done in the current world. People tend to use Stripe to build the kind of things that did not exist 10 or even 5 years ago. Entirely new kinds of businesses and business models, going from SaaS models to marketplaces to crowdfunding platforms to mobile services to on-demand services. And the good news is they don't need to, whenever they scale and go international, Stripe covers that for them as well. They don't need to reinvent the wheel every time they go to a new market. I was hearing the previous conversation panel, there were lots of questions around LATAM. How do you go LATAM? In fact, one of the things we measure our success by is how small the payments team and our users actually end up being. So now, if you look at a market like Spain, this is especially important. It's still in the early days, but the potential here is just incredible. If you think about equipments, Spain has the highest smartphone penetration in Europe, 71%. If you think about talent, Spain has one of the most qualified workforce and talent space in Spain, including with engineers and developers. Its entrepreneurial scene has never been as dynamic as what it is today. 2,500 startups created in 2015. That's 25% more than 2014. When you talk about VC funding, we've seen 83% growth of VC funding going to Spanish markets between 2014 and 2015. Yet, when you said that, less than 5% of consumer spending today in Spain is actually happening online. 5%. Who knows what that number is going to be in a few years from now? 20, 30, 50, 70%? But what's about sure is that this number is going to be an order of magnitude larger than what it is today. Fixing this problem, shifting offline commerce and purchases and habits online, is what gets us really excited at Stripe. And as commerce is shifting online, and mobile is transforming and disrupting every single industry out there, new businesses and new ways of purchasing and new habits are going to come into play and are going to be started. So we've been in beta in Spain for a little more than a year, and we've been working with Spanish startups as well as the key players of the Spanish ecosystem, VCs, incubators, accelerators, etc., to really understand what they needed in terms of product and to make sure we had the right product to help these Spanish startups start and grow. And I must say that we've been extremely impressed by the quality of the startups we've seen here in Spain. We've had a look at our top 500 users in Spain today. And the majority of these users already do more than half of their business outside of Spain. And these are not large companies we're talking about. These are companies that are just a few months old. In the talk before me, you heard companies like Drivey, Job and Talent, Uniplaces talk about their challenges in going international and global. Interestingly enough, all these companies are companies we've been working with very closely in the past year to identify what they needed and to help them with what they needed to scale internationally. Let's have a more specific look at 3 of these companies we work with in Spain. Let's start with Deliveroo. Deliveroo is not a Spanish company. I believe you're all familiar with Deliveroo. So they're actually one of our most successful users in the world. And what's fascinating about Deliveroo is this is a 4-year-old company. And today, this company is present in 12 different markets. They started off in the UK, moved to Netherlands, went to France, went to Spain. But not only. Deliveroo is now also in Dubai. Deliveroo is in Hong Kong. Deliveroo is in Australia. And being in all these markets, what's important for them is to be able to have the same amazing customer experience that they offer their users, including in terms of payments. One of their secret weapons is they use Stripe to handle everything related to payments, including all the currencies that are related to payments in all those markets, including all the payment methods that people use in those markets to pay. And nevertheless, they still want to propose the same fluid customer experience. I'm sure all of those in the room who know Deliveroo see exactly the kind of customer experience I'm talking about. So we just talked about a UK startup who went to Spain. How about the other way around? Let's talk a second about Glovo. Take Glovo, for instance. They're a Barcelona-based mobile company. What they do is they put in contact customers with independent couriers who would go and fetch some food or anything else, any product in a store, and basically deliver it in less than an hour, wherever you want. Their business model basically involves moving money around, which means a lot of responsibilities for Glovo if they were to do that on their own. By using Stripe, they focus on what's really important for them, their product. And also, they've been easily able to export their product outside of Spain. Now, these guys are live in Paris. They're live in Rome. We're pretty excited to see which new cities are going to open in the months to come. Who knows? Glovo might become the next big global internet company. Why not? In fact, what we do at Stripe is leveling the playing field for startups to be able to go global and have the tools that much larger companies are able to build internally. Let's take the last example. Take Typeform. They were a South Summit contest finalist not a long time ago. They've come a long way since then. They evolved their business model, starting with SaaS payments, now going into other areas. They've expanded internationally at an incredible pace. Actually, more than half of their revenue is now coming from markets outside of Spain. They're the typical kind of startup that chose Stripe because they don't want to be held back by tools considerations. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, as of today, every Spanish company can have access to the full stack of Stripe products. I'm not going to go into the details of all this, but the new forms of online businesses that this will support are amazing. SaaS models, marketplaces, on-demand platforms, mobile services, e-commerce. This means several things for Spanish companies. One, Spanish developers can now focus even more on building the best products without being held back by obsolete technology. Number two, the barriers to building a business have just become a lot lower today in Spain. Number three, Spanish businesses, whether they are startups or companies, are now able to reach the global market much easier and much quicker. There are now hundreds of thousands of businesses running on Stripe globally, and we move several billions of dollars every year. Those businesses are based in 25 countries. But we're only getting started. Our mission is to make more of these internet businesses possible and to make them more successful. In essence, we'd like to grow the GDP of the internet by supporting entrepreneurs. Our goal is pretty ambitious. We've started with payments, but we'd like to do even more to help entrepreneurs. You'll see us doing much more of that in the coming months and coming years. So now, why does this all matter? Because technology is reshaping the world, not just the way we do business, but also the way we interact with each other. Because the world our kids are going to live in is going to be profoundly different than the world we grew up in. And because the internet gives the individual freedom to choose its path, whether it's starting your own company or joining a company that was started before you. We live at a fascinating time, and I'm incredibly positive about where this will lead us all. Thank you very much.